All right, good. So we are now officially recording. And yeah, I'm just so excited to have you here and welcome you to our little Exploring Plant Spirit Medicine breakout session with myself. My name is Ashley Litecky Elenbaas, and this is the beloved Kat Maier. And yeah, we're going to be sort of leading this kind of going back and forth, talking about, first, we're going to share a little bit about what is plant spirit medicine and how do we communicate with the plants. What is sort of our approach to this. And then we have a list of different herbs that we're going to just sort of kind of play a little bit of ping pong, kind of going back and forth with some of the experiences we've had with plant spirit medicine. And I see here Nicolina has joined in, and she's one of the organizers, so she's going to be around if you guys are having any tech issues or have any specific questions as we go on. So I think what I'll do is maybe I'll just sort of start off by telling you guys a little bit about my background. Maybe before I do that, can you all hear and see okay? You can set it up as gallery view, which is kind of fun. That way we can see everyone. So if you want to click that in the upper right-hand corner. And I think audio, everyone's saying that is good. So, okay, excellent. So my name is Ashley Litecky Elenbaas, and I'm the founder of Sky House Herb School and Apothecary. I was based out of Maryland in the Silver Spring area. My husband and I owned a yoga studio called Sky House Yoga, and we recently closed down our yoga studio and we moved to Minnesota. So now we're based out of Minneapolis, and my husband is an astrologer. I'm an herbalist, and we do a lot of our we crossbreed a lot of our studies and our work. And I've been studying herbs. I mean, I think like most of us since I was a child. I think that's, where a lot of us really get our insight and our inspiration from. And I'm more formally trained. I graduated from Maryland University of Integrative Health in 2008 with a Master's of Science in Clinical Herbal Medicine. And after I finished that, it was a pretty science-heavy degree. I found the work of Matthew Wood, and that really started me on, I think, what I now see as my more true calling, which is, really being a speaker of the plants and really trying to be kind of like a little bit of a matchmaker between plants and people and getting people really excited about the medicine of plants. So that's kind of what brought me here. And I've been seeing clients for, I guess, over 13 years. And, I've been talking to trees and plants since, gosh, I guess I was like 9 or something like that. So Kat, do you want to tell us a little bit about your background, and then after that we'll talk a little bit about plant spirit medicine and how we both do that.
Sure, thanks, Ashley. Well, thanks for joining in on this session or this meetup. I'm sure you've been computerized all day long, and of course you don't want to miss Tia Rona, who is just a powerful speaker. But thank you so much, because for me, I think this is really in some ways, the heart and soul of how we're showing up for these plants. And so I have a bio, and I can send you all the bio, but I too, like Ashley, I come from a science background, physician assistant. I was in the Peace Corps many lifetimes ago. So at least 40 years ago, I was in the Peace Corps, and that's where I really was introduced to plants. I didn't grow up as a child in the fields and the meadows. So it kind of came later in life, but what I did grow up as a child, I wanted to be a healer. And I just didn't know what that meant. So, so for me, I have a school, I have a 3-year clinical training program, and I really feel that our role as stewards and herbalists, how are we going to take this profession forward? How are we really going to move forward in this world where ordering pounds of herbs that may no longer be our reality? And even if it is, should that be how we work? So when I work with plant spirit, It was starting just with my love, and I'm a self-taught herbalist. I never had the benefit of a school, UE and Thai Sophia, where Ashley went is fabulous, which is why I started a school. It's very hard. It's a lonely journey. And so my relationship, and I'm going to kind of take my bio into Ashley and I thought about, instead of just talking about the plants, we would share with you our techniques, what turned us on, what are some ways that we actually build relationships. Because plant spirit, it takes time. It's a cultivation. Just as you might meet many people at this conference, but you may not walk away saying, oh, I have my best friend forever. It's an intimate journey. And so my first teacher in sacred plant medicine was Stephen Buhner. And so he would come to our school for many years, teach us training, teach us diagnostics. And so how I would work with the plants, also Elliot Cowan. Elliot Cowan came and he trained us in plant spirit medicine. And he was a little more metal, he had a little more authority. And what's really, really important is we may give you ways that we work with relationships, but this is you. I mean, I would never tell you how to be a friend. I would never tell you how to hold yourself. So that's yours and your relationship and your reading, and deeply, deeply trust yourself, because I really believe our bodies are diagnosticians. And we're going to walk through this world feeling and sensing and getting hits from our body. So Elliot had his rules and regulations, and he was a profound master teacher. And now I'm studying with Karen Sanders, who just kind of blows me out of the water with her plant spirit practices. So I'm 65, and I'm here to tell you, you just don't stop working with teachers in the sense that it's not a choice, it's a calling. And so the teachers avail. And so if you think you'll never get it, you're right. So just sit back, relax. You're never gonna, because it's this evolution. So why don't I stop at that point, and I'll pass it over to Ashley. And the other thing I would ask is, because this is such a lovely small group, please put your questions in the chat, because then we can gear this short nanosecond of an hour, we can gear towards your questions, your needs, and really see, what brought you here? What is it that you want? So I'll pass it over, Ashley, and then, yeah.
That sounds great. Yeah, I love that. So yeah, just go ahead and you can start typing now, or as things pop into your head, add them into the chat box so that we can, yeah, we can be of support and of service to you all while we're here together. So I think for me, plant spirit medicine, it really was something that I started developing as a child, but it was confirmed through my studies with a lot of teachers. And so the way that I was a pretty serious, and it's still a serious student of yoga. And so, the practice of sitting still and being quiet has been something that I've been engaging with since I was about 17, quite seriously. And I really think that for me, that opened the doorway to, I think, a deeper relationship with the plants, and specifically sitting outside and sitting still. And, I just have so many moments where I would, be leaning against a tree thinking about something, and all of these thoughts would come to me, and then I'd look and see what tree it was, and I'd be like, oh, that's a tulip poplar. No wonder, because these are the medicinal qualities associated with this tree. Or I would just kind of, be walking down a trail, and I would just be pulled, like, I don't know why, but I need to go that way. And then I would see a big field of daisies, or, just sort of these, but, really it came from this quality of really being open and receptive and listening. And to do that, you really have to have your mind in a very quiet state. What's happened to me in my clinical practice, I think probably maybe this started about 10 years ago, was that I would be sitting with clients and these little plants would like pop into my head. And sometimes it would be like just visual, like I would see a rue leaf and I'd be like, oh, okay, there's a rue leaf in my peripheral vision. Okay, I'm going to just jot that down in my notes. And other times it would just be like the word, it'd be like sassafras. And I would, so on my clinical sheets, the top right corner is where I catch the herb spirits. So when I'm listening to a client talk, I'm just like, every time an herb pops in my head, even if it feels like, I don't know how this could possibly be related, I put it in my little box where I catch it. And then as I continue on throughout listening to the client, by the end, I'll go back to my little box and I'll be like, oh, yes, I can totally see now why this one kept coming in and kept, tapping at me. But yeah, it's sort of a weird thing. It's like, sometimes it's visuals, sometimes it's sort of auditory where I'll sort of like hear like a phrase that a plant will say and I'll jot that down. And other times it's yeah, like I'll just sort of kind of get a sense of a plant. Like I'll just feel it, it's like, oh yeah, like this person really feels like this plant is a good ally for them. And so that's kind of been my technique. But I always, one thing that Margie Flint taught me is and this is something she learned from herbalist William Lesaussier, is just the power of threes. So like when a plant spirit pops in, I'm also thinking, okay, well, what are three other things besides my intuition that confirms the use of this plant? Maybe the tongue confirms that this is a good plant. Maybe it's the energetics that confirm this is a good use. And then also maybe some of the plant actions. So I'm always trying to confirm it based on, three other things that would also, that it's not purely just the intuition, but how do I back that up in some other way? So Kat, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you kind of talk about your experience.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, and to that point, that was so beautiful. To that point, there will be times also when it won't make sense, where this plant and one of the things that so many students say is, well, how do I know I'm not making this up? And so this is where the practice comes in. And this is where your relationship comes in, because when you have this resonant, almost this kind of thump in your body, you have this different knowing. And if you have lovers or children or parents, or, there's just certain things that you have the sense, you follow through on it. And that's how we're really developing our heart as the organ of perception. So yes, as Ashley's saying, yes, we do check in and we do sort of run it through a system. And I just want to tell this brief story of a Joe Pye weed, Eupatorium perforatum. And so this woman's coming in, this client's coming in, and Joe Pye in all her magnificence, Queen of the Meadow, she's walking behind this woman in spirit form. And I thought, wow. And I don't use Joe Pye that much. Kidney stones, gravel stones, kidney infections. And so I sort of, with my mental state, that, oh, I wonder if there'll be some kidney involvement or urinary. So she sat down and she's telling me this story. And most of her ailments were because she had just moved and she was very homesick. And so for me, it was so certain. I was so clear. Joe Pye walked in that, I went and I did my formula, but I had to put Joe Pye in spirit dose. And where I love to go to affirm what I felt, my journey of the plant, when you sit down, and I'll talk a little bit about what that means, how to get to know them. It's so much easier if you're a beginner and you sit down to this plant and you don't know any use of it. You didn't hear any lecture. It's a blank slate, and you're sitting down and you're taking these impressions. It's like if you heard so many things about a friend and you finally meet them, but you already have these preconceived notions of them. So what I like to do to really kind of find definitions is I go to the homeopathic Boerke, Boerike, and homeopathy is spirit. It's spirit dose. It's working vibrational. The vital force is that spirit force. And so I went to Jopai and I looked at the homeopathic remedy in the beginning, and the first remedy was for homesickness. So I would never, ever have known that. And so this is why, exactly as Ashley's saying, being open, paying attention, writing things down, because they are not our allies, in my opinion. They are our teachers. And so often when we say, well, how will they work for me? And the older I get, the more I realize, oh my God, how can I serve them? So being open and kind of listening with these teachers will find uses for them that, no teachers ever told me that. So again, it's kind of a broad stroke, but what Buhner taught, and I'm going to go with this because you can get his book and you can see the steps and it's something that's outlined, but essentially he said, first you start with the hardest step is you assume you know nothing. And you meet this plant and you sit down and you observe it. Where's it growing? What's it look like? Who's growing around? If it's in a wild place, is it alone? Is it the only one? Is it by water? Where plants grow, that's the archetype for me. That's what's going to say, if it's Jopai and nettles and hydrangea root, they're about water. There's going to be water medicine. This is where they love. This is how they grow. I mean, you can stand back and look at an oak and, a child, anyone would know what's the spirit medicine of this incredible, magnificent tree. So you assume you know nothing, you sit down and you get impressions. And you pay attention to what your body's feeling like, even a pain in your elbow, a pain in your knee, and you take notes and you really are noticing. And so the second step is then you begin to observe it. And if it feels safe to you, you taste it and then you draw it. And it's such an intimate thing, drawing. Is it toothed leaves? It's scalloped leaves? Is it soft? If you put it in your mouth and it's safe, what are the qualities? What are the sensations? What's it smell like? Does it take you back to your grandmother's peony? What is that? And then the third is that journey, and that can be just sitting and meditating, using a rattle, using drums. And that's the heart. That's using the heart as the organ of perception. So you're sitting with the plant, dropping into heart space and really asking what its medicine is all about. And obviously the first thing is you sit down and you offer Thanksgiving, because you're going to ask something, right? I would never walk up to Terry and say, hey, give me something. Tell me your life story. How can you serve me? I would say, oh, thank you, Terry. I appreciate this time. So these are relations. If I can say anything about these spirits, they are sentient beings. These are relationships, and they will show up. And we got to show up. Buhner says this is not spectator sport. This isn't, oh, I went through the garden and, oh, this is now my new flower essence. That's totally fine for you. I take issue with people who come up with new flower essences and they haven't sat with that plant for over a year. It's a deep understanding. There's many levels to that, but that's for you. If immediately that rutabakia, that black-eyed Susan makes you feel this way, then that can be your medicine, and you sit with it and you take that. So for me, it's closing your eyes and meditating, and just as Ashley was saying, sitting and listening. Karen came to my house to teach once, and she's so funny because she sits. She's a big Indian lady. She's a big Indian teacher. She said, y'all white girls, you want these plants to talk to you, but y'all are running around organizing things. Like, y'all need to stop. You need to watch your garden, and you need to listen. So don't quote me on that for her, but she would laugh anyway. So Ashley, I mean, I can keep going, but it's so fun.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I love the outline of Stephen Buhner. I think that's such a beautiful kind of step-by-step process to engage with the plant medicines. And yeah, I remember my first experience was with a plant diet, and this was not the way they called it, but this is another way to engage with plants, which is, taking all other plants out of your diet, or, your repertoire of what you might be taking, unless of course it's something that you're taking for some specific health maintenance need, but taking out all peripheral plants and herbs and just focusing on one herb for 2 weeks, and either doing drop doses for some of the stronger plants, like 3 drops is plenty of a tincture, or if it's a more tonic herb like nettles or oat straw or gotu kola, doing an overnight infusion, and then just taking that plant into your body and letting it become your body, letting it become a part of you. And I remember my husband, he's done a lot of work with with ayahuasca, which is a sacred plant medicine of the Amazon. And, he said that, in Peru, the shamans, they would say that when you diet a plant, they call it plant dietas in Peru, that when you take a plant for a long amount of time, it becomes a part of you. And that, they believe that once you make that connection with the plant, you don't need it in its physical form to help you. You just call upon the spirit. You can call upon the spirit of nettles. And I've done that in my own body before when I haven't had access. And I've said, nettles, that eczema, my little witchy finger that my husband calls it, I'm starting to get that little itch again. Nettles, come be with me, come support me. I need your strength. Come lift me up. And I'll start to feel it. I'll start to feel nettles in my body, waking up deep in the cells of my being, and its medicine starts to come forth. So I think that's another nice way of working with the plants is, like Kat said, it's a relational experience, and the diets, or doing, working with plants for a long period of time in a very intentional way, can build that too.
Nice. That's beautiful. So I want to answer Glinda's simplicity of life, help you perceive spirits more. Well, I believe that it helps us perceive so many other things, because it's almost as though the magic happens in the space in between. And so a technique that I'll teach is wide angle vision. And if anybody knows wide angle vision, it's hunting trackers. Tom Brown School teaches it. But essentially, I'm going to show you because it's really amazing and profound. If you put your fingers out in front of you and you wiggle your fingers, and then you bring them to your sides, and then when you stop seeing your fingers wiggling, that's when you're in wide angle vision. And so you have to keep doing that to bring you back there. But you see what happens just in that immediate time? What happens is you drop down into parasympathetic. So when we're focused, we're looking at Zoom, and I'm sorry, I'm so dark, and I'm looking and making sure the chat box, and we're in sympathetic mode. But when you get into parasympathetic mode, that's rest and digest. And that's when impressions come in. That's when perceptions arise. And so when we're even walking through a garden and walking through life, ideally, staying in that parasympathetic state, it's much easier when your life is simple because you're not having so many tasks to focus on. But I really love dropping into parasympathetic because when we talk about heart-centered, Buhner took us through 2 years of inner child, really intense work to drop into our heart self. That's the omnipotent. So everybody has different ways of walking into the heart and really perceiving with the heart. And that's such a profound way. And then when you're sitting in that heart perceiving place, you realize, I'm not thinking this. Did you ever have an experience you're like, you can't make this stuff up? You just can't make it up because it's in another reality. So I think wide angle vision, I love the dieta. I think that's so profound. With my students, I have them do an herb tea a month. and as Ashley said, if they aren't taking other medications, herbal medications, to really infuse themselves, to really understand who is this plant, not only their actions. Every plant has a direction. And so what direction is this plant moving in? So that's part of that intimacy. So do you want to talk about a few plants? We're about halfway through.
Yeah, let's start talking about some plants. So, Kat, why don't you start us off and, yeah, tell us a story of a plant, or yeah, kind of any plants that stand out that are kind of calling to you in the moment to be spoken about.
Well, it's funny. I kind of came into the Zoom area with mullein. So, and I know we had talked about certain herbs, um, and so my hesitancy in some ways to tell you my relationship is, again, you're going to walk up to mullein. Well, Kat's relationship is this. And, I really want you all to arrive with a blank slate. And that is truly the hardest state, because there's so many levels. I mean, I'm doing this writing project now, and I am back madly in love with dandelion. And I cannot believe that we all aren't drinking a decoction, 1 cup of dandelion a day for all of our metabolic needs. And, there's many, many levels. So for me, mullein is just so magnificent. We really welcome her into the garden. Gender is your preference. What do you feel? I would never say mullein is a female plant. That's how I experience her. Some of them are gender neutral. Some of them, yellow dock, is like the king of Siam. He's Mr. Clean, like he's strong. He's, such a real force. And that's just how I experience these plants. So for me, in working with archetypes, and another place that I would encourage you to go is to do the reads of Goethe. And I'll type that in while Ashley's speaking. Goethe was a German Prussian philosopher, probably a trust fund dude, because he seemed to do everything. He was in every art, but brilliant, brilliant writing. And he did plant spirit studies. And what he would do is he would work with the archetypal images and what's the shape and what's the form. And so, with mullein, you have, this basil rosette, and you just see this incredible, how many people do not, well, you'll look up mullein. We don't have time to figure out if you know it or not, but I chose it because it's pretty common, even West Coast, Midwest, and East Coast. So you have this strong basil rosette, and it's very, very grounding. And so up out of that central spiral, the leaves are in a spiral, and out of that central rosette, thank you very much. There's a flower head that Terry's bringing on. And there's the rosette, very soft, but it's elusive because it can be very irritating. They call it nature's toilet paper, and I don't think they used it if they call it that, or they use young leaves. So it rises from the earth, and there's this rising energy, and it's a staff. And so for me, it's those, it's a staff of light. And it is about light. And Phyllis Light, speaking of which, she came once, and I just love how she works with energetics. And she'll take a little handful and throw it into a huge boiling pot. And she'll just boil it for an hour or 2 hours in just a handful. And so, we don't know what the herb is, and we drank the herb, and we, had impressions. And what was pretty astonishing was all 25 of us had some rising energy. And so I've already, I've known the spirit of mullein to do this, but we had no idea how it worked with depression. And that's that light. And so if you've worked energetically and you see the energetic outline of somebody suffering from depression, especially chronic depression, it's like narcissism. If you've ever seen the energetics of narcissism, it's kind of turned in on itself. And so it is that Eeyore, it is this heaviness, it's a density. And so it's density that we want to work with herbs. It's repatterning. It's repatterning. So if we take a pattern of light, we're introducing that into our bodies, and we're bringing in that spirit, of what that mullein is. And so that can be in a tea. And, I think your spirit doses are 1 or 2, but I think flower essences, are phenomenal, but I'll use my tinctures as a flower essence, because when you make them in ceremony and you make them in a sacred way, I think the vibration of the plant is there as well. And you don't have people buying too many things, flower essences and tinctures. So for me, mullein is that archetype of light, the spirit of light, very guiding. When it's a biennial, the first year is very grounded and rooted, and it's profound for relaxation. I've never seen muscle, thigh muscle, hip muscle. Mullein leaf is really specific for relaxation and just really feeling settled in. So there's a lot of other things to mullein. Sometimes we've spent 4 hours on mullein, but I'll pass it over to Ashley, because we love co-teaching, or I've loved co-teaching on these forums, because it's like, oh, I get to learn from my dear friends as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love hearing the experience of that group of people all having that collective experience. And I think that's something we can do in our communities. I mean, we're in COVID land currently, so it's a little trickier, but each and every one of us can get a group of friends together and do have a plant experience like that, and create a plant circle where you all journey together with a plant. And I remember me and 2 of my best friends, we were reading Matthew Wood's book, Seven Herbs, Seven Plants as Teachers, which is just a phenomenal book on kind of plant spirit medicine, energetics, and the plant signatures. And we all suffered from fibrocystic breasts, but we didn't know that about each other, because we shared a lot, but we didn't talk about that. So we all started with the very first plant in the book, which was Madonna lily, or Easter lily. And so we all started taking 3 drops of that every day we started it for a month. The plan was we were going to do each one. So there's 7 chapters, 7 plant teachers. So for 7 months, we were going to go through this together. And by the end of the first month, we all had experienced such profound shifts, and they were collectively shared. One of the medicines that Matthew talks about is this sort of this intense feeling of being pulled in opposite directions, and sort of being black or white thinking. Or he talks about the idea of sort of the whore and the virgin, these sort of, especially around sexuality, how this plant sort of helps to cleanse the deeper sexual waters, and helps you to find a place where you can find balance between this sort of extremist type of thinking. And so at the end of the first month, the first thing we noticed was that, number one, our breast tenderness had gone away. And then also some of these sort of background issues with being just, kind of ping-ponging back and forth between extremes in our behaviors and thinking had kind of also come to a center. And so that was such a neat experience. We all actually stayed on that plant for another 2 more months because we were enjoying it so much. We were like, we don't want to stop taking this plant. But then we eventually all moved on to blue vervain and went through the whole series together. So that's something that we can do in a community with your own friends or partners, is find collective ways of doing the plant journey and doing these experiences together. And Terry mentioned that her partner is also an astrologer, and so she makes her medicine in ceremony and with the astrology. So there's many ways we can join our communities together to study and learn more about the plants and see how they can alter us in some way.
Oh, I love that collective. And what's interesting about the similar impression? Um, and I don't want to keep relating plants to people. Um, God, I just heard this amazing. I don't know if you all listen to the podcast For the Wild. Well, it's just a profound, profound podcast. Very uh, deep about the earth. And this one, my new Shiro, she's Canadian, and she was talking about, you know, the colonizing of us, just calling it Anthropocene. I know this is a segue, but I gotta say this. So she's saying when we keep calling it the Anthropocene, it's a plantis. I can't remember what the word was, but she was calling this new era a plantocene or something because it cannot be based in people. And so the whole technology, the whole answer, the whole brilliance, the plants, you know, a billion years, these plants have understood how to shift and change. So the point is of that. So listen to For the Wild. It's brilliant. It's impressions and spirits. You know, waterfall spirits. Water spirits have a certain feeling to them. You know, woodland spirits are sprites. They're elves. These forces are real. They disappeared because of um, religion and persecution, and what would happen if we saw them, what would happen if we talked to them. So desert spirits and jungle spirits, you know, jaguars, you know, they all take on their landscape and their feeling, and so there's a similarity. And so that's why when, you know, it's so beautiful that you would do this with your friends and take these herbs. And you know, it is an individual experience, but it's also generally the same. You know, just like if we all met Ashley, you know, we'd kind of get the same spirit from her, right? The same impression. We might have had a different conversation. We might have engaged via astrology or something. We'd walk away with something different. But I love that idea, especially on Zoom. This is a beautiful way, actually, for, you know, friends to get together with, you know, plant study and see what they feel. But you know, don't be afraid of just letting simple, gentle impressions um, uh, have their place in what you're feeling. And you don't need to have that. You know, brought in with other people. But when we worked with Elliot Cowan, almost all of us would always come with the same energetic, with the same spirit medicine in our own story. So if a plant was about sexuality, you know, for me, it might be crashing through Catholic castle walls. And for another woman, it might be Kundalini. But that's my mythology, that's my story. But the energy of this sexual healing plant was experienced the same. So it's just really interesting. How do we allow, you know, that medicine to really, you know, have an effect? And so it's kind of subtle. Are we talking about energetic? Are we talking about spirit? And you will feel a difference. And especially the idea of what Ashley was saying earlier, you know, either just calling on the spirit or sitting by the oak, you know, sit by the echinacea, just taste that echinacea leaf, bring that memory. Because this is how Karen teaches. I can't teach that way, it's Choctaw. But what she does is she said, you know, for example, Solomon seal root. The spirit of Solomon seal helps you make a 90-degree change. It's about change. And if I have to make a change and it's really hard, these plants come in and lay down that pattern. The spirit kind of bushwhacks in my body what it would feel like to make that change, to make that change. And then all of a sudden, I'm making that change with the aid of that plant. Now, I mean, how cool is that? And we can still nourish with borage or nettles or trip out with motherwort and all the rest of them, but realizing that the spirits are a pattern and they're helping us find our pattern. In my writing, I realized, oh my God, plants teach us how to be human. Like, who'd have thought? But I'm realizing they're teaching us how to be human. And if they weren't great enough as it was, it's very, very profound.
Oh, thank you, Kat. Yeah, I love that. And yeah, those impressions, it's true because I think part of how plant spirits work, it's a very non-linear space. So, I remember as a child, like I would get all of these impressions and there was no word to describe it. I'd get so frustrated because I'd be having all these insights, but I had no language to express them. And so I think yeah, I mean, part of opening ourselves up, and what Stephen Buhner talks about in his book, Plant Intelligence in the Imaginal Realm, is that our brains are plastic and we can actually kind of rewire the way that our brains work. And all of these sensory gates that have been closed off because of conditioning can be opened again. And so the childlike curiosity and the way we viewed the world as a child can be brought back. And these sort of non-verbal, non-linear ways of communicating reciprocally with the plants is something that we can learn and that we can remember. So we're at the end of our time now, which, gosh, that flew by so fast.
Wow, really? Dang.
So
Sucks.
I know, but
Who's
hopefully, our hope really was, yeah, just to open up a dialogue, and hopefully through our dialogue, Kat and I back and forth, that it brought some dialogue into your mind and helped spark maybe ideas or insights for your own practice and your own instigation of your relationship with plants. And, again, there's just because we've had these experiences, you may open a different door when you meet, white Madonna lily, that there might be different doors that are opened for you specifically, which I just think is such a magical part of the plant world. And I agree with you. I think plants are the future, they open us up in ways that are really hard to get to on our own. So, yeah, I hope this discussion was opening, and if you want to get in touch with Kat and I, we are available and accessible. Maybe Kat, if you want to type your information into the chat box. You can find her at her school. I also have a school that is online called Sky House Herbs. So you can find me at skyhouseherbs.com. I also do weekly YouTube videos and podcasts. So if you go to skyhouseherbs.com, you can just on my website, you can go right to my YouTube. You can follow me and subscribe and get updates that way too. And I always weave plant spirit medicine into my discussions, and Kat does as well in all of her programs and in all of the work that she does. So we've got Kathleen at sacredplanttraditions.com, and she typed in skyhouseherbs.com. Thank you, Kat. Kat, would you like to add any closing thoughts for everyone?
Oh, sing to the plants. Sing to the plants. They all have their own song. They all have their own sound. I'm a top down. I'm a scientist, and down to gardening at the end of my herbal career. But my garden is astonishing. Like, people walk by, it's so stunning, and it's because we sing. So I just really want to say, spirits love song, spirits love instruments. So really take your voices out there and really enjoy that. So I'm trying to think so I think Buhner's book and energetics and your heart, walk with your open heart and enjoy the conference. Plants rock. Plants rock.
They do, I know. And it's like, people are like the coolest people. So, You know, when Kat and I were talking about it, like, cool, we get to hang out together and with a bunch of cool plant people. So, you know, it's really a treat for us to be able to talk about this and to be around all of you and just to feel your reciprocal energy and love for this subject. So we really thank you for coming today. And yeah, stay in touch with us. You know, we want to, you know, hear from you and hear your experiences. So let us know how we can be of service, and we hope to see you around the conference in different places and spaces. And don't forget to tune in for Tierra Low Dog's keynote, which is coming up here in just a few minutes. So thank you, everyone. In terms of the recording, there was a question. I'm not sure. So if you email me at info@skyhouseherbs.com, I can give it to you directly, or it might be available in the transcripts for the whole symposium. So if you email me, I can give you all those details. Okay.
Thank you for the appreciation.
Thank
Enjoy.
you. Thank you, Kat. Hugs to you.
I know. I want to do a plant group. I mean, you won't find me all over the web like you will Ashley. She has profound classes. She's awesome. Great teachings. So much joy. I'm trying to disappear.
But you can't, because we keep calling you back because we love you. So, you know, you can drive to the beautiful mountains of Charlottesville, Virginia, and find Kat in her garden and sit with her and just, yeah, be in her presence. So, so many different ways for teaching. And I think we're both very blessed to have different platforms that we can have to communicate with you all and communicate with the plants. So, thank you guys, and be well. Take care of yourselves, each other, and take care of the plants. And we'll see you guys around.
Enjoy Tiarona.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Bye, everyone.
All right.